I'm Danny, that witch next door, and you're listening to That Witch Podcast. Well, hello, my wonderful, magical neighbor. Welcome to another episode of That Witch Podcast. I am so excited to be connecting with all of you today. If you've never been here before and this is your first time, hello and welcome. I am so happy and grateful to have you here in my neighborhood. I'm Danny, and I'm that witch next door, and I'm going to be your host, your guide, your mentor, and instructor in all things magic, witchcraft, astrology, and witchy business, and really how we live an aligned life. Whatever the fuck that looks like for each of us. That's what I do around here. I am so excited to be talking with all of you today. You know, things for me here personally in the neighborhood, I've been really reconnecting to my roots, and it feels so good. I'm opening and flipping back through past pages of old notebooks, old brainstorm lists, old ideas that I've had, old journal entries where I set a bunch of goals, times where I've written out and shared my story with all of you. I've been going back and reading a lot of those things, and just examining with an open mind and a grounded heart of how has that witch evolved over the years? What still fits? What have we sort of outgrown? What are we growing into? And it has felt so good. I've been really letting myself focus on, I feel best. I feel most in my element when I'm in teaching mode and I'm in the education sphere. And one thing that I'm really trying to bring in with that is how can I be a teacher and a student simultaneously? How can I nurture both of those such sacred archetypal roles for myself, especially in my business? And it just feels really, really good exploring that and setting my intentions and working on things that do nourish that. So it feels really nice. So how are all of you doing? How's your week starting? How's your April starting? I still fucking time warp as usual. First half of the year is just crazy. And I don't know about any of you, but I feel like the moment I get a grip on where we're at in the year changes. Quick little reminder, next week, I will be reading the answers for our neighbor highlight. I'm not going to read that on this episode. I'm going to give you an extra week to submit some stuff. I'm really loving the answers that have come through. I really, really appreciate the thoughtfulness. And I think that this question in particular, the more of us that can answer this, I think it's going to feel really, really validating and really reassuring, especially to some of our beginner witches in the neighborhood that maybe are still kind of trying to figure out what magic does mean to them, and how they do define it. And I think that this is a really important concept for us to explore when we're living in a modern world that is so, anti-magic. So I've been loving the answers coming through. Wanted to give you a reminder, don't forget to submit those. If you're in that witch school, you can send me an email. You can respond directly to any of your school bulletin emails. If you're in Mighty Networks as a full-time student, you can respond and comment on the thread that I posted in there. And then anyone else in the neighborhood, you can always contact me as well as submit your answers for the neighbor highlight to thatwitchnextdoor.com/conjurethatwitch. Now, astrology with That Witch Next Door, my full birth chart bundle of courses is officially launched. Oh, we're celebrating in the neighborhood this week. This has been such a meaningful project for myself and for my team. This is something that I've had brewing in my mind for a really, really, really long time. And then over the course of the last year, it's something that I I experimented with and explored with my full-time students in that witch school. And so I took them through all 4 levels of astrology with that witch next door so that I could see how it worked for people, or I could see where it wasn't working, and I could see where we could adjust, and I could gather that feedback. And I'm so, so glad and grateful that I did it this way so that I could take all of that beautiful feedback and turn astrology with that witch next door into the absolutely stellar courses that they are. I don't want to go too deep into it, but because we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. If you want the full breakdown about astrology with that witch next door, you can definitely make sure you check out yesterday's Moon Day Musings episode. But we'll briefly go over it at the end so that if you are interested, you have those details and you can get your course bundle. But I wanted this week's episode, since we are celebrating the launch, I wanted this week's episodes to really highlight practical and applicable astrology. If you've been in the neighborhood for a long time, you know that this is something I'm really, really passionate about. And I love astrology as a concept. I love discussing the concepts and the themes in astrology. And I find that this is where a lot of astrologers stop. There's this, I offer you readings and we can talk about astrology, but there's such a lack in teaching practical application, which is why my favorite astrologers that I followed, that I learn from, that inspire me are ones that really make sure to incorporate, how do we actually embody this information? How do we actually bring all of this beautiful practice that we're working through into the real world? It's so clear the deeper you go into astrology that it is just the gift of a divine toolbox. And knowing that must mean that it's meant to be used in some grand way. And so we're only doing a disservice to ourselves when we're not utilizing it. So really wanted to focus on practical and applicable astrology, which is why today we're going to be covering what the 5 mistakes that astrology students make and what to do instead. This is not even close to the fault of the student. In my opinion, this really stems from the education in the industry that has been approached in just the same way over and over again, much like a lot of our public school system and, curriculum, where we're approaching the same thing the same way over and over again. And this one approach clearly benefits, a handful of types of people and types of students, but not everybody. And there's a reason why so many people discover that spark of interest or that calling to learning their birth chart, and why so many of them peter out and burn out and end up giving up and not going very far past throwing their birth chart into an app and trying to look at it sometimes and then feeling super overwhelmed, which puts them into imposter syndrome, and bada bing, there you go. You got a perfect example of someone who's just going to delete that app, because after a little while, they're going to be like, well, I don't even use this. I don't even know. And whatever, I'll just keep listening to the forecast on Moon Day Musings. It's fine. Well, this is why I made the courses the way that I did, because I really, really wanted to directly address the problems, the very common problems that myself and many other astrology students encounter along the way, along the learning journey, and I wanted to improve upon them in the course. And so I wanted to talk about some of those mistakes and how you can start to directly address those concerns for your own and start breaking past some of these barriers for yourself. So first, and these are in no particular order, like at all. These are just what I personally believe to be the top 5 mistakes. First, new and beginning astrologers overwhelm themselves with way too much, way too soon. And this is a direct line, nonstop flight to Burnout Town. It's hard not to do, quite honestly. It's really hard not to overwhelm yourself and not to overload your plate and not to try to, take on way too much too soon, especially because I have found that a lot of even beginner astrology books don't do a very good job of teaching you what to do with these big clusters of information. So here are these 12 zodiac signs, and here's what they are. Here are these major planets and placements, and here's what those mean. And then here are the houses, and here's what those mean. Some beginner books will take it a step further than that. And they'll say, okay, well, here are the placements and the planets, and here's what those mean. And then you'll get another page right after that that's like, okay, now let's look at Mars through all 12 of the zodiac signs. Let's look at Venus through all 12 of the zodiac signs. Let's look at the moon through all 12 of the zodiac signs. And it goes, that's one of the more quote unquote thorough approaches. And the same thing will happen for the houses in books similar to that. Here are the 12 houses. Here's what they mean. Let's look at the first house in the sign of Aries. Let's look at the 12th house in the sign of Taurus. Okay. And the thing of it is that while most of those books that are written by wonderful astrologers that are very, very knowledgeable, those little what are called horoscopes, okay, anytime we look at a list of placements that's like, hey, this planet in this sign or this house in this sign, and this is what that might mean for a person with that is a horoscope, okay? Many of those horoscopes are very accurate. And so people read those books and they're like, yeah, that is definitely my Jupiter. I absolutely resonate with this experience a lot. However, I work with and tutor and talk with a lot of these folks, just like myself, that were also reading those same books. They're usually really popular books too. They're usually the top recommended as soon as you go to look up, how do I learn my birth chart? How do I learn astrology? They're some of the top recommended. And the problem that happens is we go, well, wait, I don't understand how the zodiac sign, wait a second, what's the zodiac sign? What's the planet? But I don't understand even what the house is. How can my house be in this sign, but your house is in that sign? I don't understand. And it's because there's this onslaught of information instead of taking it piece by piece, examining each piece, not only through the horoscope, but through the function in the actual chart. That's a really, really, really big one, is understanding its function. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're just trying to memorize lists and lists and lists of information. So for this first mistake, here's what I recommend doing. And this is very similar to how I structured this inside of astrology with that witch next door. This would be in level 1. We do want to learn the 12 zodiac signs. We do want to learn we do want to learn the major planets and placements that, most mainstream astrologers are going to be utilizing and reading and looking at. If you want to go deeper than that on your own afterwards and start getting into asteroids and stuff, that's great. But focusing on those major planets and placements and then the 12 houses, we do want to explore all of those. But we want to do this in a self-paced format that actually promotes retention and understanding and is not so heavily focused on a memorization game. I personally really, really like teaching the zodiac wheel one pie slice at a time. So the whole zodiac wheel is divided into 12 signs, 12 houses. And the traditional zodiac wheel, you can download right now a free reference chart, by the way. If you need to look at the traditional zodiac wheel and what I'm talking about, we have this on my website right now. If you go to thatwitchnextdoor.com/resources, you can download the reference chart today for free, and you can save it on your computer. You can save it on your phone so that you have it on the go. You can print it off and keep it in your astrology notes. It's super, super helpful. That's also available on the blog as well. The reference chart on thatwitchnextdoor.com. Super, super helpful. So if you need that, make sure you go run and grab that. When we look at it and we look at it divided into these 12 sections, or these little pie slices, as I'm referring to them, we can then go one pie slice at a time, starting with the first house, starting with Aries, and starting with Aries ruling planet Mars. And we can say, okay, this is Aries. This is the zodiac sign. The zodiac sign is like the character or the vibe that an actor portrays on the stage, okay? Mars, the planet represents the actual actor, okay? That's going to be portraying the character of that zodiac sign. And the house, that first house, well, the house represents the setting or the stage that this is all taking place on, okay? And you take your time and go pie slice per pie slice, and let yourself at your unique pace. That is the key. We're not trying to shove the entire zodiacal wheel in our face. Again, we're not trying to burn ourselves out. We're trying to streamline this. We want to promote retention. And I suggest going a couple pie slices at a time, then taking a full-blown break. Okay? Walk away. Close the book. Turn off the computer. Close the app. Whatever it is. Take a break. Let yourself have a full integration period. This is so incredibly important. Then let yourself start to come back to it. Maybe practice a little. Maybe now you're going back into your notes. You're picking up where you left off. Oh, that's right. I went through these little pie slices last time. I made it through the first, second, and third houses. I looked at Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. I looked at their ruling planets of Mars, Venus, and Mercury, respectively. And it's not all making perfect sense, but because it's not going to at the very beginning. And that's totally and completely normal. And now we would practice a little bit. Let me look at my own natal chart. Where is Aries for me? Where is Taurus for me? Where is Gemini for me? What about my Mars? What about my Venus? What about my Mercury? And you let yourself go in this nice, slow-paced way as you make your way through the whole entire zodiac wheel. And I have found that by approaching it this way, oh my Lord, you will set yourself up for such better understanding and success throughout your studies, and especially later on, because what you're training your brain and your mind to do, your brain and your mind, high synonyms, what you're training, we'll pick one. What you're training your brain to do is to start recognizing the chart itself, where these signs reside next to one another, for example, or in correspondence to one another, and how, on the traditional wheel, Mars is, here rules over Aries, and in my birth chart, my Mars is in my 10th house. Interesting. I'll kind of put a little pin in that for later. Very, very interesting. And you'll find as you continue through your studies, later on, you'll go, oh my God. Now that I'm starting to have an understanding of how these parts and pieces actually function together, now that I'm really gaining that actual understanding, not memorization, I'm starting to actually understand. I'm going to be able to look at my Mars in the 10th house and go, wow, now that is fascinating. Thinking about Mars being in the sign of Gemini in the 10th house, how fascinating, given what I have learned about Mars and it ruling over Aries and it traditionally ruling over the first house, okay? So I highly recommend going one pie slice at a time, learning through the traditional zodiac wheel, and allowing yourself to move at your own pace, because this is going to train your mind and your eyes to recognize the chart and how everything kind of sits with one another better and better over time. And it will help you understand how these parts connect with and work with each other so they don't feel like these floating pieces in space, which is not very helpful. Okay. Mistake number 2. Beginner astrology students focus too much on the signs only and not enough into the planets, placements, and houses. So I see this a lot. People start getting really excited about astrology. They follow an astrologer they like. They drop a couple of horoscopes that just fucking slap. They just really, really resonate. And, that person's like, oh, that is my sun sign. That's my sign. And they focus on really learning these 12 zodiac signs. But the moment you bring up a planet or the moment you bring up a house, they're like, I don't know what that means. I'm not there yet. And this kind of bleeds into my answer for the first one, where this is because we are focusing on one area too much. We're giving way too much focus to just the zodiac signs. And we need to understand, this is such an important tip. It's going to sound a little, I don't know, general, I guess, because I don't have like the most concrete advice for this, but stick with me for a second. Zodiac signs get kind of all this love and glory, and planets and houses and these other major placements or points on the chart take this huge back seat. And people are like, yeah, I don't really understand what the Mercury thing means, but I know Gemini. Trust me, I'm a Gemini. This person's Gemini. Well, you don't fully understand then. You're cutting yourself off at, like, seriously, all of the potential that astrology and your birth chart could be giving you. The zodiac signs are one piece that are just as equally important as the planets and the houses. And so it's not helpful to focus only on learning them, which is why I kind of refer you back to mistake number 1 or solution number 1, which is I really recommend downloading a picture of the reference chart and going one pie slice at a time and challenging yourself, right? That's why we're going at our own pace, so we're not overwhelming ourselves. We are challenging ourselves. Our brain likes challenge. I have to remind people this a lot. It's okay that you're not getting this right away. It's okay that you have to practice this. This is super healthy activity and stimulation for your brain that's promoting a lot of critical thinking and a lot of problem solving. So don't try to just go the easy way and say, well, I'm just going to focus on the signs. If you want to do that, you can, and you will be cutting yourself off from the entire rest of the world. And again, potential that your birth chart has for you. If this really is a gift of a tool from the divine, then you are cutting yourself off from, I don't know, 95% of it by only focusing on the signs. So challenge yourself. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself to be studying these all 3 of those layers, the signs, the planets, and the houses. Those are plenty basic enough for any beginner, so long as you are going one step at a time. You're not trying to memorize all 12 signs at the same time that you're trying to memorize all the planets and the order that they're in and their orbit, and you're trying to memorize all the houses and how. No. Go one pie slice at a time so that you're genuinely creating and cultivating understanding, not putting yourself into a memorization game, which again is therefore going to cut you off from really the true potential that I know you're trying to reach. Okay, mistake number 3, halfway there. Beginner astrology students restrict themselves to 1 or 2 resources only. And yours truly is super guilty of this. I am such a fixed fucking sign. Like, when I find someone or something that I love, I just go all in, and I am like, I'm just going to consume all their content. I want to learn everything from them. Everything resonates. And that's great. Do that. When you find someone that resonates with you, hell yes, go gung-ho. Especially if the more content that you're consuming from them, the more you're learning. Fuck yes, I'm going to applaud you the whole way. That's amazing. And once again, cutting yourself off from huge amounts of potential by limiting yourself to 1 or 2 resources. So this is only ever trying one app or one website that shows you your chart. I know that I use time, and I know that any of you that have been listening long enough knows that I love Time Passages. I love Astrograph. That is the company that creates the app Time Passages. I love it. I can talk about it this way and talk about it with such passion and revere because I have tried so many and because it checks all of my boxes. That's why I'm like, oh no, seriously, I recommend Time Passages. It's great because you can do this and this and it doesn't do this for you and it's great. That is because I dated for a little while before I made my commitment, okay? And I really encourage you to do the same thing. If you have been only on CoStar, for example, I really want you to challenge yourself and try out Time Passages or try out Cafe Astrology, try out astro.com, try out astroseek.com. There, and it's astro-seek.com, by the way, just so that you go to the right place. Everyone's brain works differently. And so all of these companies and softwares that created birth chart generators, they created them based on how their brain works and what their preferences are. So this is why it's so important to experiment, because you gotta find your match. You gotta find that site or that software or that app that resonates best with you and is going to give you a visual of the chart that actually makes sense more and more for you over time. If you're using, this happens a lot, especially with astro.com. I love astro.com. It's extremely accurate. It's free. Astro.com is also who owns Astro Wikipedia. I think it's astrowiki.com officially. I can't remember, but it's the official astrology section of Wikipedia, and it's ran by astro.com. So I have to remind people a lot. I know that Wikipedia has the reputation that it does blah, blah, blah. We all know. But certain branches and certain umbrellas within the umbrella of Wikipedia are owned by and ran and managed by really credible people and companies. And the astrology side of Wikipedia is ran by astro.com. I believe it's Astro Dentist. Sorry, I can kind of picture it in my mind. But they are known for their credibility and their accuracy. So AstroWiki is actually really helpful and really accurate resource. So number one, I wanted to turn you on to that. But in general, I get a lot of students that are like, especially beginners that are like, well, I'm on astro.com because they said it's the most accurate, but I have a hard time reading it. Yeah, because it caters best to intermediate and advanced astrologers that are very, very, very used to looking at the chart. They're very used to looking at multitudes of different charts and comparing them. We're used to that craziness of lines and symbols that we're looking at. And so I can hop on astro.com and I can make sense of that. But when I was first starting out, I was forcing myself to use astro.com, just like many of students of mine that are like, well, they said it's accurate. It is. But that doesn't mean it's helpful at this particular stage for cultivating understanding. So this is really similar to when I very first started that Witch Next Door. It started off as a side business it was a side business to my main company that I was co-running. And I had always wanted to run a blog. And so I started that Witch Next Door to be a helpful blog where people could come and learn about witchcraft and astrology and how to actually use that in their life. And it's so cool to see how it's evolved to that, but in such a bigger way now. And when I was researching, what website host should I use for a blog? I'm trying to do the right thing and educate myself, and everywhere you look is like, oh, you got to be on WordPress. If you're going to be a blogger, you have to use WordPress. And there's probably so many of you out there listening to this that are like, oh my fucking God, this is what happened to me, because I know multiple people this also happened to. You get on WordPress because that's hands down what's recommended over and over and over again. And then you get on WordPress being the person, the non-website developer that you are, the non-coder that you are. And you get into WordPress and all of a sudden you're like, I am so in over my head. And I will never forget when I finally started doing the research. I was like, well, let me just see. We had been using Wix for my other company. And so I was really comfortable using the Wix dashboard and site editor and stuff. And I was like, let me see what the blog side is like on Wix, if this is easy and functional to use. Yes, of course it is. It's perfectly fine and wonderful and so much more user-friendly. I will never forget my switch from WordPress to Wix. There is nothing wrong with WordPress. And I'm sure that if you know what you're doing, it is the better website host. I'll be honest with you though, I have no idea why, because I don't work that in depth with website development. And maybe it's because I don't focus solely on blogging only. And maybe by now I would have run into issues or something if that were the case. I'm not sure. But the point is that when I switched to what was clearly the more beginner friendly, user friendly website host, everything got easier for me. It just makes me laugh so hard because my business went from wanting to rip my own hair out for over a year. I tried to force myself learning how to use WordPress, fucked up my code. So my website was so jacked up. I had to hire a freelancer on Upwork or Fiverr somewhere, someone that was a coder and specifically knew WordPress. And I was like, hi, I messed everything up. Can I pay you $50 to log into my WordPress and fix it for me? And the moment that they did, I was like, I'm fucking transferring off of here. And everything got easier after that. Everything. I could actually focus on what I wanted to do, which was run my business. You need to apply this to astrology. If you are learning from astrologers or using resources or books or apps or websites that are just not making sense because it's too advanced or too visually overwhelming or overstimulating, whatever that, if it's just too much too soon, that's okay. You should be learning from as many as possible, first of all, because we want to have as big and broad of a perspective as we can. The bigger perspective we have, the more rounded our overall interpretation of a chart can be. The more limited our learning and limited our resources is going to limit our perspective. And therefore, it's going to also in turn limit our interpretation when we're trying to read a chart later. So we already want to broaden our horizons as much as possible. But we also want to make sure that we're consuming things that actually make sense to us, that are promoting that understanding and not putting us in a position where I feel like I just have to memorize these symbols all the time. You know, that part should be happening naturally. You should start learning and memorizing the symbols naturally because you're going one pie slice at a time. You're learning these signs, planets, and houses one step at a time. You're looking at the symbol associated with them as you move through each pie slice, and you're giving yourself that integration time, that break, and you're doing practice with your own chart and referencing back and forth from, okay, here's what this article or this course or this book says. Let me find that in my actual chart. And the more that you do that, you'll start naturally memorizing what those symbols are and not feel like you're in a place of forcing. We definitely don't want to feel ever like we're forcing anything. I have had to learn this truly through such experiential, the hard way, in so many areas of my life. So many, but definitely namely study and learning and work stuff, where I have finally gotten to a great point personally where now I can even help my clients start to recognize these signals within themselves and respond similarly. I'll recognize when I'm like, am I forcing this? I'm definitely forcing this now. I'm sitting here at the computer, my eyes, my brain, my body, everything wants to tear away from what I'm doing right now. And I'm literally forcing myself to finish this. That is the time your brain and body are saying, I need a break. I need to look at something else. Or this way, this approach that you're trying to get me to consume, it is not working, does not compute. Try this another way. And a wonderful way to start recognizing that more and more in yourself is by broadening the amount of resources that you're utilizing, because you'll be learning from someone for forever and going, well, yeah, I do. But, as soon as I try to look at my own chart, like it's just not making sense. But I'm looking at it every single day. I'm trying and trying. The second you try a couple other people, you will find time and time again that same person will go, oh, well, as soon as I heard this person say it in this way, it made like 4 other giant things click and connect into place. This is why it's so important to broaden your resources, okay? Do not limit yourself to just 1 or 2 resources, whether that's just one book, one course, one teacher, one Instagram account, or whatever it is. You want a lot and you want them to resonate with you. Okay. The 4th mistake, they don't practice outside of looking at their own chart. People, this is, oh my God, I can't tell you how long I did this for. You're trying to learn your birth chart. So of course, where do you keep looking? At your birth chart over and over again. You will inadvertently create a glass ceiling for yourself. I see this so often in that cusp from going from beginner to intermediate, and that like crossing over the threshold into being an intermediate astrologer especially is, I just, I don't know, that you either start to get bored or you start feeling like, I know all this. I know my chart. I've seen that. It's like this. Your chart should feel never ending. It should feel like every time you go in there, there's something new to explore, or there's something you could go even deeper into. And if it's not feeling that way, you're creating that glass ceiling for yourself. You're limiting yourself to only looking at your chart. And I always draw the analogy of when you're hungry and you're looking for a snack and you go look in the fridge and you don't really see anything and you close it. And so you go to the pantry and you open it and you don't really see anything. Then you go to your fridge again and go to the pantry over and over and over again. You're like, there's nothing. When really what we usually need is a perspective shift. When we're starting to feel that way, our brain is like, dude, I am so fucking conditioned to looking at this thing. I don't know what you want me to come up with. We've looked at this the same way over and over again. Now, what's a wonderful, wonderful solution for that? Looking at somebody else's chart, and particularly somebody that you know. And this could be in a multitude of ways. I have students who use their loved ones' charts. I have students that specifically use celebrities' charts. I have students that use transits for this, or the chart for certain events. It's just any other chart outside of your own birth chart, honestly. Because what this will do is you've already created such a strong foundation, such a strong impression of in your mind of what the chart looks like, especially if you take my tip and you're really going through the traditional zodiacal wheel and you're using that to learn and compare and contrast with your birth chart. Add in even just 1 more or 2 more charts that you can compare with. And I see a lot of connections get made at this point too. The moment that someone's like, oh, I was feeling stuck. And then I pulled up my son's chart and holy shit. And I'm like, yeah, that the connections just spark into a wildfire. And lo and behold, you know what happens time and time again? They'll come to me and say, I never even realized this in my own chart until I looked at his. Yep, happens all the time. So don't only use your own chart to practice. I don't recommend, if you're super beginner, constantly looking at other charts. That's why I said 1 or 2. If you are feeling that stagnancy in your own birth chart, if your own birth chart still feels like this giant infinite sea of exploration that you're still trying to just chip away one at a time. Yeah, you'll probably be doing fine practicing in just your own chart. But when you do eventually and inevitably hit that point where you're like, I don't know, I've looked at it, looks the same. It looks at the same thing I've done over and over again. I don't know how else to look at this Mars placement. I don't know how else to look at this. Then use somebody else's chart that you've never looked at, but preferably someone that you know pretty well, because it really, so since you've created such a strong impression and you've built such a beautiful foundation in your mind, right? You've been going one pie slice at a time. You're learning these 12 signs and these major planets and these 12 astrological houses. What will happen when you look at somebody else's chart is your brain will naturally go, oh, but didn't that look this way over here? But for them, it looks like this and it's over there. Whoa, I wonder if that's why XYZ, right? And this is, again, really great for your critical thinking, for your brain, a wonderful way to practice and actually utilize the information that you've been using. Do not forget to use other people's charts. Okay, the fifth mistake that beginner astrologer students make is they don't use real life application. Yep, we're circling right back to that, which means astrology remains a conceptual idea instead of a tangible practice. So my best solution for you, best medicine for this issue is you're doing the study thing. Clearly, you're making time for that. You've bought a book. You've bought a course. You've signed up for a subscription. You follow this astrologer. You receive these horoscopes every day, or whatever it is for you. That's great. You're doing that part. I trust you that you're doing that part. Where most people need the reminder, and what a very helpful prompt can be, after learning, especially when you make a big new connection, especially when you read something and you're like, holy shit, this resonates so much, or holy fuck that, I get it now, I get it, it's connecting. Especially when those ones happen. But in general, after you've been studying and learning a lot of information, I want you to ask yourself, how can I embody what I'm learning about myself here? How can I take this information that I'm learning about my chart and look at it as cosmic advice, straight from the cosmos, straight from my spirit guides? This is advice. How can I embody this in my real life? Think about it. This would be like if you got to know somebody even better, and this was someone you were having some struggles with. There was some conflict. You really love this person. You care about them. You're not trying to end your relationship with them, but there's been a lack of understanding. And then you get to sit in on a therapy session, or they share this huge background about their beliefs or their experience, whatever it is. And it reveals all this information. You're like, oh, that makes so much more sense about this person. All right, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'll just keep going about this relationship in the exact same way as if I don't know that information. That's what it's like. I'm serious. It's the exact same thing when you learn all of these huge, big things about yourself, and people will be like, well, I don't know how to apply it into my life. I'm like, okay, well, it's going to look a little different for everybody. If you're really looking like, how do I actually embody my chart? A personal one-on-one session with me or an astrologer that you resonate with, that's going to be a great idea, because they're going to look at your chart and go, oh, you're the kind of person where X, Y, and Z, I would really recommend activities like this, or you probably don't like activities like this, I would steer clear, et cetera, et cetera. But in general, I find that alone, that posing that question to yourself is usually like tremendously helpful. To just work through on your own. How can I embody what I'm learning about myself from today's study? What's one thing I could put into practice that I learned about my Mercury placement today? If I know that I'm the kind of person that thinks this way and communicates this way, what's one thing I could do to nourish that, or nurture that, or give a little medicine to that, right? Or balance this out, whatever that is for you, okay? And actually, we have one bonus mistake. Of course, I always throw a sixth one in there. this was important. I drafted the whole episode structure out and I was like, oh yeah, we'll go through 5 mistakes. I love 5s. I'm a life path 5. I work 5s, multiples of 5s are my magic, everything. I always set volume to multiples, everything. But whenever I'm doing content for the neighborhood, I'm always like, oh, here's a bonus. This was really important though. And this is why I had to add it in. As soon as I realized it after I mapped out the 5, I was like, ugh, I don't want to skip this. This is huge, and I'm glad it's the last one. And this was the one that maybe, I didn't list any of the other mistakes in a specific order, but maybe it is best that this one's coming out last. One of, if not quite possibly the biggest mistake that beginner astrologers make is getting swept up in the fear. The fear-mongering and this idea of quote-unquote planetary influence or cosmic influence. This idea that planets control us and influence our behaviors. First of all, if you just want my personal flat out opinions and beliefs, I don't believe it works that way. I don't believe that's what astrology shows us. And in my opinion, the best, most prolific astrologers will tell you the same thing. This isn't a bunch of planets up there fucking with us. It doesn't work that way. Some of the best that experts in astrology have been able to describe it, that at least resonate the most for me personally, and I really, really encourage you to continue exploring this after this episode, is that we are reflectors of one another, that we are connected, and us and the planets, I mean. And in my opinion, the best astrologers will tell you, I don't really know why. There's some connection there. We could theorize all day what that connection is, where it comes from, what the purpose of it is in the whole grand divine scheme of things. But at the end of the day, it will remain just that, a discussion and theorizing and a debate. We don't know for sure. But what a good astrologer will also tell you in the same breath is, but it works, but it's accurate. Whatever that connection is, I don't necessarily know of its origin or why it exists, but it exists. And the further and further you go into astrology and the more and more layers you pull back, the more and more undeniable it gets. And this is why the more seasoned you become in your astrological journey, the more it doesn't faze you when people say things like, oh, look at this, some fucking muggle comes up to you and is like, oh, look, another person telling you that the planets are controlling you today. Well, no. And if anybody's out there telling you that Mercury retrograde is here to fuck up your life, I would hit that unfollow button yesterday, because you don't need that shit in your life. You do not need any more fear mongering in your life than we are already constantly fucking obliterated with every day in our fucking media. Okay? So wherever you can eliminate total bullshit, unnecessary fear mongering in any part of your life, I'm a big fan and supporter of that, number one. And number two, the planets don't fucking control us. It doesn't work that way. Again, I don't know exactly how it works, but I know that there is a connection there. And I know that you can go back fucking centuries and centuries, if not millennia, and look at the astrology of the time and look at the historical events going on at that time. And boom, there's the astrology showing us the connection between what the planets were doing and how they were interacting with each other and what was transpiring on Earth and how similar those looked. There is some kind of connection there. And this is why I believe it is a tool. And the way I frame my definition of astrology is it's a very divine and elaborate and very accurate data tracking system. When we follow the orbits of these planets, when we understand what each of those planets represent, what kind of character they're portraying when they go into a certain sign, how they interact with one another, and what area of life that is occurring for in each of us, it's accurate. You can see why this is a gift or a tool from the universe, because it will help you best access your full potential in this life. And not only that, I have found that astrology has strengthened my faith and my trust in our soul experience and our spiritual experience. Whatever our divine purpose is, it strengthens that the more and more and more I study. It puts me closer and closer to a place of peaceful surrender. I'm comfortable with what I don't know. I don't feel afraid that I don't know everything. It's not my fucking job. I'm Danny. I'm Danny Wright, that witch next door. It's not my job to know how the universe came into existence and why it works the way it does and why the laws of physics are what they are and why I don't know. I don't know. It's not my job. I'm one of billions of other human beings on this planet. There are certain things above our pay grade, our soul pay grade, and or above our life form's pay grade in this life, and that's okay. It puts me more and more and more into a place of peaceful acceptance and peaceful surrender, where I'm like, it helps me feel even more informed in the places I can control, which is within myself, in my own reality. And it helps me in my external, all the things that which I cannot control. It helps me get closer and closer to a place of peaceful surrender and acceptance. So don't get swept up by the fear mongering. If you follow people in general, whether it's astrology or not, that make you feel anxiety, I have to tell people this all the time. Like, even if you are a really passionate activist, if you are consuming information from a specific source that is constantly putting you into a place of fear, that's not helpful. It's not helping your activism. There is a way to receive and give information that is beneficial and helpful. And there's a way to give and receive information that literally does nothing but instills fear. And that's not fucking helpful. And there's no goddamn point to it. So you should feel like wherever you're getting your astrology information, you should feel more informed and more empowered, both to say, I know this that I do know, and I don't know this that I don't know, and I'm fucking good with that. That's what a good astrology resource should do for you, okay? And don't get sucked into any conversations with muggles arguing with you about, oh, are you here telling me the planets fucking control me? No. And if you want to have a respectful conversation and actually listen to my point of view and the role that astrology more likely does play in our life, I would be happy to offer that perspective to you. But if you're going to show up to this conversation and try and tell me the definition of my quote unquote pseudoscience that you know literally nothing about, you can see yourself out the door. I am not having this conversation with you. Boom. So these are the top mistakes that beginner astrologers make. And I hope that if you find yourself encountering any of these issues, I hope that this gave you some tangible direction to head in, or at least got your mind into a good place of critical thinking to start developing your own solutions as well. Because if you are feeling the strong pull to learning your chart and learning astrology and using it in your life, it's probably going to be a really helpful thing for you. If it's starting to resonate already, the more you learn about it, it's probably going to serve you really, really well. So make that process as easy on yourself as possible. So again, if you are ready to actually read your own chart, not just listen to the forecast, not just, look at the horoscope on Instagram or social media, and you want to be able to open time passages or your AstroSeek chart, and you want to be able to look at that circle of all those colors and numbers and symbols and start understanding it, being able to actually use it for yourself, my friend, Astrology with That Witch Next Door courses are for you. They're literally designed for you because I went into these courses with little baby astrologer student Danny in mind and was like, okay, where did all of these missteps happen? And how could we address that in a course so that this actually feels digestible and this actually feels possible? And yeah, it's going to feel a little overwhelming sometimes, but how can we get out of a place where we're trying to force a bunch of memorization? We're actually cultivating understanding. Go to thatwitchnextdoor.com/astrology. We are celebrating all week long with a big launch sale. Our flash sale is over. I did want to come on here today and make sure I mention that. The early bird flash sale ended last night at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time. However, if you did miss out on the 40% off, fear not, my friend, because all week, all the way through Sunday, April 9th, look how many days you have, 5 whole days from now, you can get 28% off of your 4-level self-paced course bundle to help you learn your birth chart. Level 1, the bones of the chart, actually understanding, right? Going through one pie slice at a time, the signs, the planets, and the houses, what those angles are, what the circle is, all of those functional structure parts and pieces. We'll cover all of that in level 1 together. In level 2, we'll dive specifically into the zodiac signs and really start to explore their complexity and nuance through the layers of each of those zodiac signs, their modalities, their elements they belong to, and their polarities. This is a really, really helpful level that is very glossed over in a lot of traditional astrological education. And this sets us up beautifully for levels 3 and levels 4, where in level 3, we will explore the degrees in depth. Another area I find that astrologer teachers or astrology teachers are like, well, we don't want to overwhelm them. Well, the human brain is pretty incredible. And if you give the information in a way that makes sense and you don't skip over important information like in levels 1 and level 2, by the time you get to level 3 and you get to the degrees, we are set up and prepared and in a place of being able to understand these degrees, which, my friends, really truly sets you up for success in the final level, level 4, which is reading major aspects. And this is where our time together in Astrology with That Witch Next Door will end, but your true astrological journey will begin, because after you finish level 4, you are going to feel so much more comfortable with your chart. It is not going to look like a literal mess of a language that you don't understand. It might not make perfect sense yet, and that's okay, because again, astrology in our chart should look like something that we can always, forever, never stop exploring. Always, always. But it will also actually make sense to you. You'll feel like you can actually look up the transits and make sense of it. You can listen to Moon Day and go, oh, now I understand why this time of year or this time of month when the moon goes into this sign, this is what happens, because the moon is always talking to my moon or it's talking to my Venus and they interact in this way. Oh, this makes so much more sense. That's really where the magic of astrology begins. And that's exactly why I wanted to create these exact courses in this exact way for the exact kind of student that you are, so that you could go through these levels in your own self-unique pace. In the videos, I even tell you, pause this, stop this class right now, go take a break. Here are your practice prompts for when you're ready after your break is done. You could take a break for a day, you could take a break for a week, you could take a break for a month before you come back to the course, whatever fits your schedule, your lifestyle, and your unique learning style. The whole thing is set up so that it feels like a lot of that really good, effective traditional astrology education that's being delivered to you in more of a mentor style delivery, in more of a mentor, or I should say, delivered more in a mentor style approach, where you feel like I'm sitting there with you. I'm encouraging you to take your time. I'm encouraging you to pause where you need to pause or go back when you need to go back and actually work through and cultivate that understanding, not putting yourself in a place of pressurized memorization. So again, thatwitchnextdoor.com/astrology, you can get 28% off of the class bundle right now. If you buy all 4 of these levels, okay, each level is a full self-paced course in and of itself. The full bundle is over 7 hours of video. You are getting 4 full-length workbooks. You are getting all 4 presentations so that you can follow along at your pace in the way that makes best sense for your brain. And if you buy all of these individually, you're going to spend $400. You're going to spend $398. But if you get your class right now during our launch special, you're only going to pay $288. You're going to get over $100 off if you buy the bundle because we're celebrating with the launch. Okay. So don't forget thatwitchnextdoor.com/astrology. Add the course bundle to your cart. You are not going to be disappointed. I am so excited for all of you. I've been so excited seeing the purchases already come through from the early birds and stuff the last couple of days. This is really, really exciting because again, I already had such wonderful feedback from my students in that witch school, my full-time students that already did this course over the last year, like I said. And I cannot wait for everyone else in the neighborhood to be able to take these courses as well and see how transformative it is for them. Now, full-time students, you already have access to astrology with that witch next door. Do not go purchase the class bundle. You already have it. It's in Mighty Networks. So if you've been eyeing that witch school as a full-time student and wanting to enroll with us, keep that in mind that if you enroll for $30 a month, you're already going to get all 4 levels of astrology with that witch next door. Plus, you're going to get access to a super dope private online community where you can actually, with whom you can actually learn this information with. Part-time students and next door neighbors in that witch school, fear not, you have a lifetime discount that you can use on that witchnextdoor.com, and that includes on these courses. You can combine your part-time student discount or your next door neighbor discount with the launch sale. You can apply it on top of the 28% off. So don't hesitate. Thatwitchnextdoor.com/astrology. This is the cheapest you're ever going to get these courses from me, everybody. So please don't sleep on this. Thatwitchnextdoor.com/astrology. Don't hesitate to reach out to me with any questions. There's a little space on that page to contact me too if you need any clarification. I'm so excited for you and your astrological journey, my friend, and I'm absolutely honored to be your instructor. Thank you so much for spending your time today with me and every day. I hope that you found this episode informative, inspiring, helpful in some way. I hope that you all have an absolutely magical rest of your week. I'm so excited for all of you that are diving into astrology with that witch next door this week. Ooh, you should post about it. Tag me on Instagram. I'll shout you out. Don't forget to tag me. All right, everybody. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful, magical rest of your week. Make sure you stay safe. I hope you have a ton of fun and stay magical out there. And happy full moon, Libra. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed That Witch podcast today, I would be super, super grateful if you would take a moment to head over to Apple or Spotify and leave a rating and review. It really helps to support the show. Or if you just have a friend that you think would enjoy what we're doing, what we're talking about here, you can just share the show with them as well. Now, if you yourself like what you're doing here and you want to get more into the magic of the neighborhood, I highly recommend checking out my monthly membership, That Witch School. It's kind of like a witchier, more interactive style of Patreon subscription where you can enroll at a tier level that fits your lifestyle and budget. You can get instant access to all of the bonus content that we've already done, as well as all of the future amazing to come bonus content that we'll be doing in the future together. There's exercises for strengthening your intuition. There are loads of resources for studying astrology and learning your birth chart. We've got guest workshops, bonus episodes, exclusive discounts, and so much more. My full-time students also get exclusive access to Mighty Networks, our private online community platform, which is basically like a way better and way more magical social media platform with a bunch of really cool people like you that just want to learn from and support one another on this witchy spiritual journey. If this sounds like something that you would really enjoy, head over to thatwitchnextdoor.com/enroll and explore the tier level of that witch school that would fit you today. Now, if you have any questions after the episode today, any inquiries, show suggestions, anything you'd like to share with me, you can head over to thatwitchnextdoor.com/conjurethatwitch. Remember, I'm just always right next door. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next episode.